How you doing, man?
Doing good, Jared. I don't see any viewers just yet. Let me.
That's okay. We've had a major uh, malfunction with Webinar Jam, unfortunately, and I'm sure that will be resolved. But unfortunately for this week, we had to improvise, and so Jeff was gracious enough to set us up with a new webinar, uh, uh, platform with Webinar Ignition. Thank you for that, Jeff. So hopefully
Yeah,
anybody can
hopefully,
pick
hopefully,
that link up.
yeah, hopefully, folks can get the word, can figure it out, and show up to the right place, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we've tweeted that out, and yeah, man, I've posted on Facebook, and for people that are over at the other place looking around, sorry about that. Oops, not ideal, but I don't know what else I can do. I'm trying to see if I can go in there and post, share the link, but I don't think it's going to let me do that. It's not as kind as I'd like it to be.
I'm going to be sharing it with my social media right now.
All right, we'll get Larissa on here for a little bit, and we'll just hang out and chat for a little. Yeah. Jeff, how was your day?
I was good. It was good. Can't complain.
You could complain, but nobody.
Nobody listening. Nobody cares.
I'm sure that's not true. I care. So.
Let's see here. So it looks like Larissa is sharing it.
Very encouraging. I'm going to tweet it out again right now.
Okay.
Just try to see what we can do.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. Well, see if we can get Larissa in here. Does she have the link?
She does. I emailed it to her just a moment ago, so she should have
Even
it.
better. Beautiful.
And then I'm going to go check to see if there's. We've got 2 viewers right now. We've got a couple folks who have followed the link. So welcome. In case you
welcome, yeah.
In case you've just joined us, working out some technical difficulties. So.
Yeah, if you'd be willing to share the link that you used to get here, that would be tremendous. If you could post that on Facebook or tweet that out. You don't have to, but it would be nice for those who are wondering what's going on.
Hey, Jared, is your wife watching Netflix again?
I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe my wife is doing it.
It's possible. I'm just happy to hear your voice and see your face, Jeff, after the last few minutes we've had. So I'll take it.
I'm sure.
All right, so we'll get Larissa in here, and we'll just get going. We'll have a party with 3 or 4 people. That's better than no people.
Absolutely.
All right, Larissa just messaged me. She's connecting, so party's about to start, Jeff. Hold on to your hat.
All right. There she is.
Here I am.
Hey, Larissa, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Man, we've had better days, but we're thrilled to have you and Jeff Brown on Podcast Movement Live. We had to shift here last minute, and I hate when things like that happen, but I appreciate good folks like yourself being willing to be versatile. Thank you for that.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Jared, I don't know how long you want to give this, but we actually, I can tell how many people are viewing. We actually have 1 viewer right now, and we had 0 there for a moment. But unless we get 10 or 15, I don't know if you want to go ahead or try and reschedule, or just 1 person in the room right now besides the 3 of us. So
I tell you what, let's take 10 minutes and let's just talk a little bit And while we're waiting, if anybody else picked up on it and can join us, that's great. And in the meantime, Larissa, if you would just do a short introduction, maybe tell a little bit about yourself.
Sure, sure. Yeah, my partner and I started our podcast, well, our first podcast, Vegetarian Zen, about a year. Well, we started in July, but we launched the website in last March, and we became vegetarians a year ago, January. So we started that because we got off to a bad start as vegetarians, and we had such a problem with it, finding information, and we wanted something that was non-judgmental and kind of easygoing, and we didn't really find a whole lot of that, and that's why we started VegZen. So we've been doing that since July, and then we just started our second podcast, which is all about The Prophet, the TV show with Marcus Lemonis. So it's kind of a fan podcast with a little bit of a business sense thrown in. So.
Hey, Larissa, would you be willing to share exactly why you're here on this Google Hangout today? So how did this all transpire?
Yeah, I won a contest. I won in Christmas Story. I won a major award. So I was on last week's webinar, and I was as a viewer, and I won. Y'all did a drawing at the end for a co-host for this week, and it was me. I said, pick me, and then I saw my name come up on there, and I was like, wow! So super excited.
It was. I was excited for you, Larissa. You've been very vocal in the chat rooms, and yeah, if you're looking for a place that's fun, this is a good place to be. Jeff Brown's in the house, so I don't know what other party you could go to that would be as good as having Jeff Brown. So. All right, Jeff, how many people do we have in the room? We got anybody?
2, and one of them is our good buddy John Dennis.
Hey, John, how you doing? All right. So, yeah, we're going to give it a few more minutes, and I tell you what, Jeff, since you've been so gracious and patient, if you'd be willing just to talk a little bit about what you're up to at Read to Lead and Podcaster Academy, and then depending on how many we have in the room, we'll decide whether or not we should continue on or maybe we just reschedule. How about that?
Okay. Yeah, I'm at readtoleadpodcast.com. I've been doing the podcast for about 10 months now, and it's a podcast where I interview nonfiction business book authors each and every week, and I've had folks on like Simon Sinek, who I know you've had, Jared, Chris Brogan, Gary Vaynerchuk, Dan Pink, Liz Weissman, Andy Andrews, Dan Miller, folks like that. And I love reading, I love nonfiction, and I love business books, and I love talking to people about their books. And so that's what I do each and every week. And we talk about not only the latest book, but business, leadership, entrepreneurship, marketing, career, personal development, that sort of stuff. And then late last year, I launched, as you know, Podcaster Academy. I almost said Podcast Movement. Podcaster Academy.
The Podcast Movement Academy.
Yeah.
Podcaster Academy, which I am an alumni of. Let the record show.
Yeah. Jared was a part of the first class, and who graduated in the end of February. We did it again in April. It's happening again in June. And in fact, I'm doing a webinar on Monday with Jeff Goins in front of his tribe to talk about the June class and encourage folks to sign up. But yeah, I cover the talent coaching side of the equation. There's great guys like Cliff Ravenscraft and John Dumas who are helping folks get set up and get started and getting launched and figuring out all the technology and recording and all that kind of thing. And I really emphasize the talent coaching side of it, having spent 26 years in radio and helping people be more comfortable, more natural, conversational behind the mic, conduct better interviews, how to really engage with their guests, scheduling guests, and how to get pretty important people on your show, key ways to follow up with those folks. And then one of my favorite things is just helping people understand the intimacy of this audio medium and how so many of us as podcasters don't realize it, but we drive a wedge between us and our listeners inadvertently with a lot of the things that we say, a lot of the phrases we use, a lot of the mannerisms that we incorporate on our shows. And I try to tear those things down and give people new tips and tricks and techniques on how to engage their listener, especially when they're talking to a guest, and how not to leave the listener out and that sort of thing. And so these are all things that I learned as a broadcaster and hosting a morning show and having a talent coach who met with me every week and told me how much I sucked and all the things I could do to be better, and it's fortunately rubbed off, and I'm just trying to share all that knowledge with folks who are in the podcasting world. So
I think you're talented, Jeff.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I'm actually going to be in your webinar on Monday, and sounds like I need to take your academy. So.
Well, hit Jared up for a discount code if you do.
There you go.
I think everyone should consider taking the academy because for that reason, I mean, you learn how to podcast, but then how do you then take your podcast and really do something special with it? And Jeff lays out some really good a good framework that helps you do that. And Jeff has, in my opinion, one of the most professional podcasts out there. It's great, whether you like interview-based shows or not. I mean, it's fantastic the way you run that show. Jeff, I'll tell you what. What's our count now in the room here?
4.
We got 4 people. Okay, so to the 4 of you that are gracious enough to be here, we really appreciate it. We had a problem with Webinar Jam, and to be transparent, Dan Franks and his lovely bride are on a cruise this week, and we opted to go ahead and attempt to do the webinar, the Google Hangout this week. We were originally going to not do it, and hence, hey, let's bring in Larissa, because if we bring in Larissa, it's going to be good. Well, it is going to be good with Larissa, but the problem is Webinar Jam, which is our normal webinar platform, had some issues getting connected with that, and I'm sure that'll be corrected for next week, but that caused some obvious problems for this week. Jeff threw together a last-minute webinar, so here we are. I'll tell you what, Jeff, we can go ahead and just handle this for a few minutes, or we can try to reschedule. I don't want to waste anyone's time, and I apologize for the craziness up to this point.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I'm more than happy to stay on for as long as you like. I think it would benefit those who anticipated being here tonight and aren't getting the notification because they're not on Twitter right now or wherever, Facebook. I think it would make sense to attempt to reschedule it, whether that's a Wednesday or not. I know you have several booked up, but I think it would make sense to schedule it again. But we've got 5 people on the call now, so I'm more than willing to hang out for a few minutes and address those folks. And they can ask questions, too. Below the video is a place where they can enter their name and any question that they want to ask. It's a little different than the typical Webinar Jam setup that folks are maybe accustomed to, but it is there for folks who want to ask questions. In fact, I think somebody's already commented. Not a question per se, but a comment. But
is it rude and inappropriate?
No.
If it is, we deserve it, or I deserve it.
Karen is here saying, "Hey, sorry, just found the link." Thank you, Karen, for being here because there was a little bit of a technical snafu there, out of everyone's control. Ron is in the house saying, "Glad I could get in." Renee here too. And if you missed it, Jared and I are discussing maybe rescheduling this because it was such a last-minute thing, and only I think 5 or 6 people are actually in it right now, and we don't want the other 20 or 30 or however many who would have otherwise been here and who are trying to figure out why we're not on Webinar Jam right now and we're somewhere else. There's probably a good 20 or 30 people who are trying to figure out what's going wrong, and so I think it would be great to schedule it for those folks. So for those of you who are here, let's give them a few minutes, 5-10 minutes of some decent content, I guess, and then maybe call it a night. I don't know. It's your show.
I tell you what, Jeff, I agree with that. Let's for those who are gracious to be here, let's give them a few minutes. I know, Larissa, you've got some well-prepped questions because Larissa is the consummate professional, and we love her. Larissa, I'm going to ask that you just hold off on your questions right now just in case we end up bailing ship here in 10 minutes. But, Jeff, for those who are gracious to be here and who've traveled so far in the link surfing, can you share a little bit about Podcaster Academy? I know you mentioned it earlier, but maybe just give us, those of us who are podcasters, we want to improve our game. What are some things, what are some tips that you can give us here in the next few minutes that can help us?
Yeah, sure. One of the tips, one of my favorites from the very first module, which is a part of it, is called the 5 must-have elements of an effective podcast open. Excuse me. And one of those in particular is a step or is a tip, a technique that probably 95% of podcasters don't do. That I think if you do this, it'll really help separate your podcast from most of the pack. Jared, you do this, and so you're one of the few who does do this. I've heard you do this pretty consistently. But it's where, if you're doing an interview-driven podcast, it works really well. If you're not interviewing folks, this could be you or your co-host if you have one. But if you have a guest, this is almost always your guest. And what I'm talking about is you take from somewhere in your interview something they said, a quote, something that, as soon as you hear them say it, it's like, oh, I got to tweet that, or oh, I got to share that. It's something that by itself is relatively profound. It's 8 to 12 seconds, optimally about 10 seconds, and something that stands on its own, that outside the context of the interview makes sense by itself. And you copy that from wherever it is in the interview, and you bring it to the front. And you use that as a little teaser of what's to come. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. The very first episode I did was with Dan Miller. And Dan Miller said something during the course of the conversation that just really, really struck me. And he said, if it ever becomes clear that I've stopped learning, dig a hole and push me in, because I'm of no use to anybody. About 10 seconds, a very profound statement. When you hear that, you're either like, oh man, I agree with that 100%, or you hear that and you're like, I don't agree with that at all. You're probably not in the middle somewhere. In other words, you're not indifferent to that. You're probably one extreme or the other. And I think your job oftentimes as a podcaster is to use mechanisms like that and other things like worldview statement. We won't go into that right now, but Jared, you know what that is. Things that essentially draw a line in the sand and dare your listener to cross it and go on this journey with you. And regardless of your response to that statement a moment ago, if you're in the affirmative, or if you're thinking, hey, I agree with that statement, then you're likely to continue listening to the podcast because you want to hear your beliefs affirmed. If you disagreed with that profound statement that you heard, you're likely to continue listening as well, but for different reasons, because you want to hear the guest or the host defend what they believe. And so I think when you can go a little extra effort and put the little extra work that's required to find that nugget and bring it to the front, that's going to be something that really helps you grab and keep the attention of your listener. Because you have to remember, your default position has to be, every time you launch a new episode, somebody, dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people, are hearing you for the first time in that latest episode. And so you can't take anything for granted. You can't suffer from what Jim Collins calls the curse of knowledge and assume everybody's kind of up to speed. It's like coming to a party and walking in not knowing anybody and hoping and praying somebody's going to introduce you around, versus walking into a party where you're immediately greeted and ushered in and introduced to people right away. And you want to make your listeners feel like they're coming into a party where they know what's going on. They're not, they haven't stumbled upon some secret club and they don't know the secret handshake. Bring them up to speed immediately, and these 5 elements that I talk about help you do that. And a couple of them in particular really separate folks who might be otherwise lukewarm towards your content from the folks who would really be rabid fans of your content. And it helps tell those folks who might otherwise be lukewarm that this podcast is not for you. And if done well, and you're open in your content, if done well, your podcast won't be for everybody. I think your job is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have, but to do business with everybody who believes what you believe. And if you can be emphatic about what you believe in the open of your podcast, then those who believe what you believe are going to follow you anywhere. Give me 2,000 rabid fans of my podcast over 10,000 lukewarm ones any day.
Well, Jeff, I think everybody would love 2,000, but for the person that maybe has 2, is 2 enough? I mean, what is enough? I mean.
Well, we've got 8 in this room right now, so I'd say 8 is enough, to quote the
8 is enough.
TV show.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Well, that really depends upon you. I mean, I think you're probably in the business of podcasting because you want to impact people. And I don't know that there's really a minimum or a maximum. I think we all want to impact as many people as we can, certainly. But I don't necessarily think it's about reaching the most people as much as it is about reaching the right people, and the people who are most open to your message. And you need to do a really good job on the front end of your podcast in using these 5 elements I talk about to make it really clear as to what you're about, what you're in the business of doing. None of us have a problem when we create our podcast opens. None of us have any problem. None of us forget to tell our listeners what our podcast is or what it's about. That just comes naturally. But Simon Sinek says in his Start With Why TED Talk and in his book, he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so if you're not telling people your worldview, which is the answer to why you do your podcast, then you're going to have a tougher time getting people to buy in, getting people to share what you're doing, getting people to be excited about what you're doing. I believe that your open is as critical as the content itself.
Well said.
Yeah.
Okay. Larissa?
Yes. Yeah, no, I was just gonna totally agree. I was just gonna say, you know, in our case, our audience is not huge, but very, very loyal. And I think that that is just that just drives home what you just said, is that, you know, you have to be true to what your ideals are, and then let those people come to you. So I totally agree.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I disagree, Jeff. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. Maybe the Read to Lead podcast is not for you.
No, it's definitely for me. Hopefully it's for everybody. I think the Podcaster Academy is for everybody. So that's really good information. What are some other tips that you want to enlighten us with, Jeff? We all want to be better podcasters.
Well, I talk about, and this is one of the 5 elements, I talk about your worldview statement. I referenced that a moment ago. It's essentially the answer to the question why you do your podcast. And in the case of my podcast, and I think you can go a couple different ways on this, you can state that yourself at the outset of your show from your perspective, or you can do what I do and have a voiceover person state that for you. But regardless of who's saying it, it needs to be from a camera angle that the listener cares about. So to give you an example, my I believe statement, or my worldview statement rather, is I believe that intentional and consistent reading is key to success in business and in life. Essentially what I'm saying is if you don't do these things, you're not going to succeed. If you don't do these things, you will not fail. That's the emphatic nature of that statement. And I think you have to make sure that you're saying it from a camera angle that the listener cares about. So I don't go on and I don't say I believe this and just, you know, that statement I just shared. I don't say it that way. I have it stated in such a way that the listener is going to be pulled into it. So my voiceover gal Joy says, if you desire true success in business and in life, then intentional and consistent reading is a must. And so Joy states it in such a way that it immediately is from the listener perspective, not Jeff Brown's perspective, but it's letting you know what I believe and saying if you desire to succeed and have true success, then Jeff believes that you need to do these things. And that's what this podcast is about. And you either agree with that or you don't. And if you don't agree with it, like I said earlier, you're likely to stick around anyway because you want to hear me defend that. But if you do agree with it, you're sticking around because you want your own beliefs affirmed. You're not likely to be indifferent about that statement. And if you are, then again, that's an indication this is not a podcast for you. And I want people to know that right away. I don't want to create content and for folks to have to listen for 15 minutes or 20 minutes to figure out if it's for them. They need to know in the first 60 to 90 seconds, is this worth their time? And if I'm not making it clear whether or not it is, then I'm not doing my job.
Right.
Yep. Well said.
Great.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it. I sounded so mean there, didn't I? I was like, no.
Yeah, that's kind of harsh. So.
You sound like someone with a strong opinion, and that's good.
Is that your worldview, Jeff?
Yeah.
So how are we doing on how's our viewership now?
We have 5, 10, 11.
Wow, we broke 10. Okay.
We're in the double digits.
Cool.
For those of you who joined us late, I'll just throw this out there. We had a snafu with Webinar Jam, and we're punting. I'm speaking for Jared here, and we're talking about maybe rescheduling this for all the folks who otherwise are missing this tonight. I think you guys have been averaging like 25 or 30 folks a week, and so there's a couple of dozen that are probably missing out tonight. So maybe we can reschedule this in a future date. But in the meantime, we want to give you some useful content and advice along the way. Is that fair, Jared? Is that accurate?
It's totally fair, and I appreciate everybody's patience. I'm actually fielding messages on my phone while I'm trying to be fully attentive to all the goodness that Jeff is bringing, and Marissa. So I again apologize for the craziness, but yeah, I say let's take another few minutes and let's just share some more, and then we'll probably make this a short one and we'll reschedule this and do it upright. And I appreciate everybody's understanding about that, being understanding. So.
I'll share one other thing if you want me to jump in.
Please do.
Okay. Is that okay, Larissa?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. One of my favorite things I love to share about, I think it's in Module 2 of Podcaster Academy, is just this idea of engaging your listener in the midst of an interview. So this is specifically if you do an interview-driven podcast. And a lot of folks sort of kind of look at like that puppy dog look where you kind of tilt your head and you go, huh? Like, are you really sure about that, Jeff? And what I'm getting at is what I try to do every interview that I do 2 to 3 times per interview. I know Jared has heard this, but Larissa, you probably haven't heard this. Is I will sort of metaphorically, after my guest has finished answering a question, I'll sort of metaphorically turn my head as if I'm, looking at an imaginary listener who's sitting in here with me, and I'll start referring to my guest in the third person, as if I'm talking to someone else. And then I'll finish that, and then I'll go right back to the guest. And it's something like, say I'm talking to Simon Sinek, and Simon finishes answering a question. I might say something like, in Chapter 5 of his book, Simon talks about X, Y, and Z. Simon, tell us a little bit more about that. That was a really lame question, but you get the idea. It's just very subtle. I just made that up off the top of my head. It's very subtle, but for just a moment, just 4 or 5, 6 seconds, I talked to my listener. And a lot of folks struggle with that. They're like, does that work, or that feels weird? Or think about it from the listener. When you're in your car or wherever you're listening to a podcast, think about how intimate that feels. As far as I'm concerned, as a listener, excuse me, as a listener, this is happening right now. I know it's recorded. I know you did this already. I know I'm listening to a recording. But as far as my brain is concerned and my ears are concerned, I'm here now. You're here now. So quit reminding me that none of you are here now. A lot of folks will introduce their guests by saying things like, when I recorded this interview, blah 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 blah, and okay, here's now the interview that I recorded. Things like that, or they'll say things like, well, to those of you listening out there. And things that remind people that this isn't an intimate experience. You need to be thinking about you're addressing a single person. People are experiencing your podcast one person at a time. Think about like when you mass email a list. You don't refer to that list as hundreds of people. People are experiencing that email one person at a time. And so in your email, you talk to one person, right? So don't treat your podcast any differently. It's not like everybody's in a big auditorium and you're on stage and they're sitting in the auditorium watching you as you do your podcast. They're in their car, they're on the treadmill, they're doing chores around the house, they're by themselves probably. So address them like the individual they are. Address your listener as one person, and then take advantage of those opportunities in between answers from your guests to set up a question by first going to your listener and saying, hey, when I read this book, I discovered this. Simon, tell us more about that. Like it's the difference between, here's a good analogy. It's the difference between you and your guest and a listener sitting around a single table at a diner together versus you and your guest sitting across from each other and your listener being an adjacent table. Most podcasters treat their listeners like they're at an adjacent table instead of like they're at their table.
All right.
That's all I got.
No, that's good. I mean, if people tuned in and heard just that, I think that would really be helpful. There's a lot of podcasts, unfortunately, that don't understand that concept yet.
Right.
Hopefully they'll learn from you, Jeff. I tell you what, I hear some dogs in the background. Who's the guilty party? Jeff, you're a dog lover.
Yeah.
I think my wife must be home because Fritz and Frank just went scurrying out of the office. That's why the doors cracked open back here, because I knew that would happen eventually. They'd want to get out.
No,
so my apologies on the dog noises there. But
oh, no, all good. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I strictly counseled our dog not to bark during this hour. So, yeah, she's under kind of under house arrest, I guess, upstairs.
Awesome.
Well, for the 11 of you that are in here, thank you. Jared, is it time to call it a night and reschedule this thing since because of the technical snafu, or what?
Yeah, we are going to reschedule, but I'd like to take just a couple more minutes real quick, Jeff, and let's talk about podcast movement. So, podcast movement's obviously coming up in August, and I know you were excited about it. But one of the things that when I first came to you and I said, Jeff, we would love to have you at the podcast movement, I remember you kind of made a comment about, oh man, that sounds great, but public speaking, that kind of makes me nervous, and I just laugh at that because I think this guy's got thousands of people listening to his show every week. So would you be willing just to talk about that for a minute? I think that's funny. You're very comfortable and you're an award-winning broadcaster, yet getting up in front of a group, that might be something that wouldn't be your first pick. I'm interested in hearing about that.
No, I'm not willing to talk about that at all. No, I'm kidding. No, it's funny. I've done lots of presentations within companies that I've worked for, but I haven't done a lot of public presenting in public. It's just mostly been inside the companies that I work for, and I just haven't done it that much. But I think it's going to be fine. I'm actually doing a presentation this coming Saturday as part of PodCamp, which is an unconference taking place here in Nashville, and so I'm doing a presentation there. Maybe the same one that I end up doing at Podcast Movement, I'm not sure. But and I'm also on a panel with Eric Fisher and Dave Delaney and a couple other guys. But
cool.
But yeah, I haven't done it that much. Yeah, it's different though. And it is odd when I share it with people. Yeah, it is kind of weird because I have no problem, being live on the radio with thousands of people at any given moment hearing me. I have no problem on webinars like this. There's a dozen people in the room, but I can't see any of them. I have no problem getting up on stage before an artist is set to take the stage and address 16,000 people, because I've done that 100 times. It's not me they're there to see. I'm just warming them up. But to be in a brightly lit room with 100 other people, they're all there to have me impart some sort of wisdom to them. That's a little bit more intimidating. So. Like I said, it probably wouldn't be to me if I'd done that more. I've always hidden behind the microphone and just taken solace in that. But I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll take some medication before I go up on stage or something.
Have an adult beverage and
yeah, exactly.
That's a reason to attend Jeff's session right there.
Which is going to be really weird if my session's like at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I think there'll be some strategy behind when we have your session. That's cool. I'm pumped, man. And PodCamp Nashville sounds pretty interesting. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on there.
Yeah, I've been a couple of times. Haven't been the last few years, but they call it an unconference, and there's folks there presenting on topics like SEO or technology in general, podcasting, blogging, general marketing, and that sort of thing. And so it's a free event to attend. It's all day, like 9 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. Anybody can come for free. I think this is like the 7th one we've had, the 7th annual one here in Nashville. Okay. Anybody who wants to present can sign up to present. Now, sometimes they've had overflow in presenters, and then they do like a lottery type of thing where they sort of kind of randomly select people. But most years they get just the right amount of speakers. They've usually got 4 tracks going on at any one time. They've got it's the whole 9 sponsors, and they've got lunch provided or lunch that you can purchase kind of on site. And so that's kind of the gist of it. It's actually taking place at an art college this time. It's been in various locations throughout the years. Vanderbilt and I can't remember, Cadillac Ranch one year was another place we had it at once. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And I guess I've spoken at one of them years ago. So this will be the first time in a while. But really looking forward to it. To be able to discuss a topic like podcasting, which I'm so passionate about and love, and being on the panel too will be a lot of fun. So, and I'm looking forward to getting the practice in too, leading up to Podcast Movement, so that when it comes time, I won't suck.
No, that's impossible. All right, so
not a very big chance of that, is there?
No, none. We love the humility. You bring it. All right, so Jeff, earlier you talked about a special webinar that's coming up. You're doing that with Jeff Goins, and would you tell a little bit about, for those who don't know Jeff Goins, maybe mention him, and then what's going on with that webinar?
Yeah, Jeff is a prolific author and blogger. He's a guy who in early 2011, I think it was, launched a blog and got very intentional about it and decided I'm going to write a new post every single day and I'm going to start guest posting. And 8 months into that process and that intentional, deliberate process, he got offered a book deal. He's sort of tightly connected with Mike Hyatt, Michael Hyatt, michaelhyatt.com. And so Jeff's been featured on Michael's blog quite a bit. Michael does Platform University, and Jeff's been one of the monthly webinars that Michael has done. So Jeff's platform has grown tremendously these last 3 or 4 years now, and I've known Jeff for about 8 or 10 years. In fact, Jeff interviewed at a radio station with me for a job, and I actually did not hire him. We joke about that now. He didn't have a radio background, and I needed somebody with a little bit more of a radio background, and he was a great guy otherwise, but we joked that if I had hired him, I would have ruined his entire life path. And so
I never knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so there you go. But Jeff, I talked to him about doing a free webinar. What I'm going to do on Monday with Jeff's crew and anybody else who's watching this now who wants to come is basically teach about 90% of Module 1 of Podcaster Academy. But going back to those 5 must-have elements of an effective podcast open, I shared briefly a couple of them. We'll be spending about 45 minutes or so on all 5 and going into detail about those on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Letting folks know more about Podcaster Academy for June for those who might want to go a little bit deeper, but teaching Module 1, or 90% of it anyway, completely free. So if folks want to sign up for that, they can do that. The URL is, I'll try to give this a couple times, it's readtoleadpodcast.com/podcaster-academy. So readtoleadpodcast.com/podcaster-academy. We've got about 230 registered right now, so I'm real excited about the potential there. I don't know how many will show up, actually, but we got almost 250 registered, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's outstanding. Congrats. Very cool. All right, so Larissa, do you have any good questions for?
Or any bad ones?
We are gonna reschedule this and then hopefully pick up some of the people that were left behind. But in these last few minutes, let's maybe ask Jeff a few more questions. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, sure. Well, as Jeff for sure is well aware, I've been stalking him for days.
As you should be, yeah.
Trying to come up with questions, and I've been doing my Jeff Brown research, and so I see that I was interested to hear you talk about PodCamp, because I actually read about that today when I was looking through some other things. And now you also host Geek Breakfast, correct? Do you still do that?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So that's just kind of like a once a month get together for all the geeks around to talk about stuff, right?
Yeah, my friend Dave Delaney started that. Dave is in Nashville, and that's where the first one we began. They happen all over the world now, but the town that I work and live in, Franklin, Tennessee, is about 30 minutes south of Nashville, and I just approached Dave one day and said, hey, can I start one in Franklin? Is that too close? He's like, no, go for it. So in 2009, we started a Geek Breakfast group in Franklin, and as you said, once a month. Anybody who's a part of the group, it's administered through Facebook. We meet in a restaurant the second Thursday of every month. And much like PodCamp, we were talking about a moment ago, kind of the same kind of people, same kind of folks who are interested in podcasting and blogging and technology in general. We just gather and talk about all those sorts of things and anything else going on in our lives. And I've made some great connections, some folks that I've been able to work on some projects with together that I wouldn't have had a chance to meet otherwise. And so it's just something fun to do. I'm basically the guy who administers it and sets up the meetings each month, but that's really the extent of my involvement. I kind of lead it from that angle, but it's really a group effort when it comes right down to it.
Sweet. Well, you inspired me, so I went on the Geek Breakfast website, and I actually signed up to be an administrator for San Antonio. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. But you inspired me.
Awesome. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I actually did have a question for you.
I'm gonna do my awesome dance, okay?
Wow, Jeff.
Every time I do something like that, Vicky says, "Don't ever do that." So, yeah.
Wow, Jeff.
I'm not sure if your wife does that to you.
Yeah,
but
there's no one watching, so you can get away
yeah,
with
right.
That was just for Jared.
There you go.
I demand that you do that at Podcast Movement. That was the Podcast Movement.
You know, that's my third podcast movement today.
Nice. I have a question though, because you were in what, radio for 26 years, correct?
That's right. Yeah, you did your homework.
All right. So, my question is, how do you find that podcasting compares to doing radio? And I mean, in your experience, and do you have like a preference, or I mean, I'm sure it's hard after doing radio for 26 years to say, yes, I like podcasting better, but how does it compare?
Radio pays a little better, I will say
Wow.
that. There was a steady paycheck there for a good long while. But the funny thing is, I'll give you an example to kind of illustrate my answer here on the based on the question you just asked, and that is, I had a friend come to me about a year and a half ago who wanted to start a show, a 30-minute show, and asked me, how do I get it on the radio? How would I get it on your station? How would I get it on another station? And I said, if this were 1997, this would be the conversation to have. I said, but it's not 1997. This was about 2011. I said, you don't need my permission to start a radio show. There are no gatekeepers anymore. When I started in radio, I had to, kind of get within the good graces of somebody who would let me work at the AM station that nobody listened to, for 8 months before I could work my way up to the 50,000 watt FM station that everybody listened to. And I had to earn that along the way, proving my performance. I told this friend of mine, Bill, I said, Bill, you can start a podcast tomorrow and not just be heard in Nashville, but you can be heard all over the world. So what are you coming to me asking permission for? Pick yourself, as Seth Godin would say. And that's exactly what he did. And he's been podcasting now for, longer than I have. He's been podcasting for over a year and loving it. Now, he's not making a living doing that. He's not making a killing. It's not why he wanted to start it. It wasn't about monetizing it, or it was a passion, something he wanted to do, whether he got paid to do it or not. And that was his mechanism, his method for doing it. And so, ultimately, to answer your question, I think the difference is, radio, I spent all that time in radio, which I loved, but it was at the behest of someone else, to please someone else, to be tied to a studio 4 hours every day, starting at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, which is not a lot of fun either. And with podcasting, the sky's the limit. I'm the boss. I can do whatever I want. Now, within reason, I want to do things right strategically and draw an audience. I don't want to just run crazy and not think deliberately and intentionally about stuff. But I don't have to answer to anybody else, and so I am the boss. And so, and you guys know that as podcasters. And so, to me, those are the biggest differences. It affords you the opportunity to pick yourself instead of waiting to be picked. Again, to quote Seth Godin.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's an awesome answer, and I think that's why we're doing this too. I mean, as you said, we like to help people and we like to be able to contribute to that. But I think the freedom to be able to do it, when and where you want is just beyond compare. So yeah, that's awesome.
Hey,
you guys,
Jeff,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, would you be willing just to recognize some of the people who've hung in there and who've come out, and let's recognize them real quick.
Yeah, and I will say I just glanced at this for the first time in 15 minutes, and we do have some questions.
Okay.
I want to say thanks to Renee and Karen and Ron who have been here through the course of the evening. I don't know if they're still in the room, but Renee says, how would you recommend a solo podcaster to best connect with the audience? As a solo podcaster, it's easy because it's just you and the microphone. Pretend the microphone is your listener. Or if you have to, cut out from a magazine a picture that represents your listener, an individual, preferably a face, not a body shot, but a head shot, and tape that up to the wall or on your monitor next to you and stare at that and pretend you're talking to that one person. So I think as a solo podcaster, it's actually a little bit easier. Karen says rescheduling would be good. I was on the other site waiting when it occurred to me to check Twitter. So we are going to do that, Karen. She says, do you address video podcasting as well? I'm assuming she's talking about my Podcaster Academy. I do not, Karen. It is strictly audio podcast training. However, I say audio podcast training. That's not really true. It's talent coaching at its very core. It's the kind of talent coaching I got in radio, which is totally applicable to video podcasting as well as audio podcasting. So in that sense, yes, we do address video podcasting because I think all the lessons are applicable. Somebody says that's great advice. Thanks very much. Not sure what she's referring to, but that's awesome.
The dance.
Yep. Ron said, "Have you already stated what the 5 elements are?" We didn't go through all of them, only because we are keeping this short in order to reschedule because of the technical snafu. Let's see. Ben Dempsey. We all know Ben.
We love Ben.
Ben says, as a new podcaster with 5 episodes under my belt, how can I improve my downloads? Any tips on recording interviews? So far, it's been only me on the podcast. Love your work, Jeff. I think consistency is really, really important. I don't know how long ago Ben started, but if you're set out to do a weekly podcast, and Jared, you're very good about this. I'm not sure how often yours come out. I think yours come out a little bit more often than that. But with the exception of 2 Tuesdays, because life got in the way, I have released an episode every Tuesday since I started. And I really think people underestimate consistency, because what happens in my journey, I think this happens to a lot of people, is it grows and grows and grows, and I hit a plateau, and I stay there for a good couple of months, and then it starts to grow again, and then I hit another plateau. And when you hit those plateaus, it can get real discouraging because you want it to keep growing. But I think the important thing to remember is not to give up when you're hitting one of those plateaus, and just keep pushing forward with consistent content. And I think if you do that, eventually you'll see that growth continue to go upward. Let's see, we got Vicky. Says, how do you feel about book diets, meaning just spending some time focusing deeply into 2 or 3 books a year? That's not my thing, Vicky. I read, as my podcast would probably lend you to believe, I read about a book a week, sometimes more. And I'm not always reading from cover to cover. I read as far as I need to read to come up with a dozen questions for my guest. And if I need to stop because I have other things I have to get to, I'll do that. But if I'm really into the book, I'll finish it. But I just kind of gauge it that way. But I think, if 2 to 3 books a year is your thing, there's nothing wrong with that. I can't get enough. I'm a voracious reader, so I'm always devouring something. Renee had more nice things to say. Thank you for that, Renee. Catching the tail end. Can't wait to rewind. Chandra, thank you, Chandra. We'll try to reschedule. Karen says, look forward to hearing more, Jeff. Mike Kim says, love your podcast, how you handle your show. A great communicator, you'll be great live. Oh, well, thank you for that encouragement.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Larissa, you're doing great, says Chandra. Great job guest hosting. Yay.
I concur.
And then Karen says, still here, sounds good. That was just a moment ago when I questioned whether or not she was possibly still here, because she was one of the first to show up. So that's I think everybody's comment and or question. I don't think I missed any, Jared.
Larissa, how new is your show?
Vegetarian Zen was we started last July, so we're coming up. We've done 47 episodes now. We do weekly, and we missed one. We missed one, and that was after NMX when I was like sick as a dog for 2 months. But yeah, so we missed one, but other than that, it's weekly. So, and then we also, our second podcast, Wisdom of the Prophet, is weekly or every 2 weeks, and we started that one about a month ago.
Now, I think some of the stuff Jeff has shared is extremely helpful. What are some of the challenges that you've run into with your vegetarian podcast, if any?
Oh no, there've been challenges. Well, it's the 2 of us doing it. Vicky, who actually just asked you about the book diet, she's my partner, and she's actually upstairs.
Hey, Vicky.
We love Vicky.
Oh, Vicky, you're so fine. You're so fine. Hey, Vicky.
Now I'm gonna hear that. Thank you.
All right.
But some of the challenges I think are just trying to get out to more people. We've marketed. We haven't done paid advertising or anything like that. Just very little on Facebook. But growing our audience, I think, has been the biggest challenge. And as I said in the beginning, we have a relatively small but very, very loyal audience. And, for us, I think that's a huge plus. Because what we are geared toward is not just vegetarian. She's laughing up there for some reason. I don't know why.
She just heard Jeff's song. Yeah.
What we're geared toward is not just vegetarians. In fact, a lot of our audience are not vegetarians. But that's one of the biggest challenges that we've had, I think, is growing our audience consistently. And it's like you said, Jeff, it's frustrating when you get stuck. And when you hit a plateau like that and you just don't grow for a while. Are you dancing? Are you like dancing, or are you you look like you're dancing, Jeff? Yeah, you.
The answer is always.
Okay.
Well, yeah, of course.
Hey, so Jeff, Larissa's been transparent here. She's saying, hey, I've been consistent, but yeah, I'm still trying to grow. So what advice do you have to Larissa? She's right here live. I mean, she's dealing with some of these challenges too.
Yeah.
What could she do?
Well, one of the things, and Larissa, maybe you and I can get together on this. One of the things I would like to do, when a student asks me those kinds of things, if they're already doing a podcast, is to dig into their podcast for myself. Mm-hmm. and hear it firsthand. I've not heard your podcast yet, but if I had a chance to hear it, I'd probably, like I do with most folks, I'd make some recommendations. Nobody's podcast is perfect, certainly not mine, but I would listen to it and give you feedback, constructive feedback on what I think you can improve upon. Maybe there's some things I'm hearing that aren't doing as good a job as you could be doing in pulling that listener in a little faster and grabbing them a little bit more dramatically, like we talked about earlier in the call. I don't know, again, because I haven't heard it, but I might start with something like that. I would dig into how you're leveraging social media and the things that you're doing there. I know one thing that has worked really well for me. I don't know if this applies specifically to your situation, Larissa, but in that I'm interviewing people, some of whom are relatively well known, not all, but some. I try to be very deliberate about leveraging their tribes without coming off too pushy or anything. But folks like Dan Pink and Chris Brogan, who I admire a great deal, both of them, have 300,000 or so followers on Twitter. If you can get one of them to share about the podcast episode they did with you, that's huge. Jared knows this very, very well. I mean, Chris Brogan just featured Jared in his new book, for crying out loud. Man, I mean, when I sit here and bow down at Jared's feet after
so
that.
You got to find the Chris Brogan of vegetarians is basically what you got to do.
Well, they're out there. They really, really are. I mean, I don't know if you've had, I don't know if she's a vegetarian, but somebody who might make sense to you have on your show is Farnoosh Brock, and she's really into juicing and that sort of thing. I know that's not the same thing.
Well, we actually did interview her for her smoothie book that just came out, and we have a recipe in her smoothie book.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's great.
See, Larissa's featured in books too, Jeff.
Yeah.
Everybody but me, apparently.
And then Vicki is coaching with her right now, so we're good. And so I totally get the leveraging the audiences of our guests. We've only had 2 interviews so far. The other one was Tim Page. He was our first. But we're definitely working on getting more interviews scheduled, and I think that that's something that will really help us in the future. But yeah, I would love to have sit down and maybe spend a little time with you if you have a chance, and kind of get some feedback. I mean, we are totally open. We're totally open. Vicki's up there yelling, "She's my coach! She's my coach!" She just had her first coaching session with Farnoosh tonight, so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that.
So you have no excuses now, Larissa. You have to
absolutely.
One of the things that has served me very, very well, and Jared is, I'm not blowing smoke here, Jared's as good as anybody I've ever seen at this. He's better than me at it, for sure. But I learned this from Chris Brogan, dropping his name here again, about 5 years ago. And Chris once said something that stuck with me. I think it was in Trust Agents, and something along the lines of, when it came to sharing on Twitter and sharing on other social media sites, he had this sort of 11 or 12 to 1 ratio. He was sharing and talking about other people's stuff about 12 times as often as he talked about his own. I see Jared doing that a lot. I've tried to implement that in the last 5 or so years since I learned that, Larissa. And one thing I found since I did that, and I was pretty good about doing it for the most part, one thing I found is when I got ready to launch my podcast, and I started calling in favors, if you will, and saying, hey, I've got something now, and I would really appreciate it if you would tell people about it.
Right.
People basically stood in line to do that for me because I had always been good about sharing their stuff more often than even sharing my own. Now, you can't go back in the DeLorean and change the past if you haven't already been doing that. But, it's just like they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? 25 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. You can start today changing that or doing that in your own life, and what goes around comes around. I know Jared could add much more to this than I could give you, because he's, like I said, he's the pinnacle of this. He's the expert on this.
Well, I've heard that phrase called deferred goodwill, and I think for anybody who's gracious enough to watch this, if you can start building up that deferred goodwill, when that time comes, like Jeff mentioned earlier, and it's your turn to ask, a lot more people are more likely to not only listen to what you have to say, but to act upon it because of that deferred goodwill. So, yeah, whenever you can notice other people or kind of hook them up, put them in the spotlight, that seems to work well. It's like using vanity to your favor, and that sounds harsh, but everybody wants to be noticed, so that's a good way to kind of build up a little bit.
Right.
For Karen, who's in the chat, she wanted to know that URL for for my webinar with Jeff Goins on Monday. I'll email that to you, Karen. But for anybody who just came in, it's readtoleadpodcast.com/podcaster-academy. But if you do want that, just pose a question to that effect just below the video, and I'll make sure you get that emailed to you as well. And somebody wants to know, let's see, with regards to a podcast open, how do you feel one has to essentially brief the listener on what the episode subject is and what they'll discover by listening to the end? Okay, that's from John. I don't fully understand that question, but if I get what he's referring to, one of the things in my open that I always do is I call it foreshadowing. I tease 3 takeaways that are coming up. It's almost always 3. It's either A, B, and C, or A, B, and C, A, B, C, and a whole lot more, something like that. And I think what you simply do there is you take 3 or 4 of your 3 of your best questions, and you turn those into statements. So if one of your questions is, Simon, why should we do X? Then your foreshadowing or your takeaway becomes, Simon shares why you should do X, how you can do Z, and this and this and this and this and this. So you just turn those questions you've already asked and already created, into statements. Really, they're just like really solid blog post titles. Think about how you'd write a really great blog post title, and turn your question into that, and those will be really, really strong takeaways that you can do on the front end that keep people sticking around until the end. So thank you for that question. I think that's what you're asking, so I hope I answered that. Yeah, I think that's all the questions. Somebody says, 4th awesome movement today. Oh, they're referring to my Sorry.
All right, so Jeff, we're excited about your session. What is your session going to be at Podcast Movement?
I knew you were going to ask me that because you've asked everybody else every Wednesday night, and I'm not sure I'm 100% decided. I've been doing a lot of free webinars, like the one coming up on Monday, and like the presentation I'm doing Saturday here locally, taking content from session or module 1 from Podcaster Academy called the 5 must-have elements of an effective podcast open, some of which we've talked about here tonight. And I'm worried because I've been doing that a lot that by the time I get to Podcast Movement, everybody's is going to be intimately familiar with that. So I'm probably presented on that more, but I'm actually thinking about doing something that's a little bit more interactive. And that delves into more of what we were talking about with Larissa earlier, and learning how to engage your listener more intimately and drive out those wedges that we just seem to naturally put between us and our listener, and actually do some role play with participants, bringing volunteers up to the front and doing some role play kind of stuff, like here's the right way to do it, and giving people almost like scripts to read or 3x5 cards. And here's the wrong way to do it, and then bring up 2 more people and go, okay, here's how it's done the right way, that kind of thing, so people can I don't know if that resonates at all, but so people can kind of see firsthand the difference between doing it really, really well, an engaging way, and leveraging the intimacy of the medium, and then doing it in a way that just pushes people away. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think you should have strategic Jeff Brown dances throughout the session.
I can't help it. It's automatic. I'll probably say
it's automatic. All right, so Larissa, thank you for being a generous co-host, and we'll be doing this again. Obviously, we're going to have a rescheduled opportunity, so we're going to get to do this all over. It's going to be round 2. It's going to be better and bigger. But Larissa, where can people find you in the meantime?
We are at www.vegetarianzen.com. We're also on Facebook /Vegetarian Zen, and on Twitter at Vegetarian Zen. And then our second podcast is Wisdom of the Prophet, and at PROFIT, and that's wisdomoftheprophet.com, and then same on Facebook. And then Twitter is at Prophet Wisdom.
Awesome. Larissa, thank you. Jeff, we're looking forward to your webinar coming up, and definitely good luck to you this weekend at PodCamp Nashville. And for those of you who are watching, if you haven't picked up your virtual pass or your ticket to Podcast Movement, go ahead and go to podcastmovement.com. But Jeff, thank you for jumping in here last second and throwing together a last-minute webinar. We appreciate that. And we ended up doing about an hour, so this is still fun, but we're going to do it again.
Yeah, let me know when you want to reschedule, and I'll be happy to.
Yeah, we're going to reschedule here real soon, but in the meantime, everybody have a great week, a great Wednesday night, and thank you for being patient and gracious with our technical glitch. All right, thanks again, Jeff and Larissa.
All right, thank you.
Bye.